One of the cars that I'm really getting excited about seeing very shortly is a 1969 Dodge Charger. Now, this is a graveyard dreams car, so what we built it into isn't what it started life as. So just keep in mind, sitting at home and searching for a car, that we can build anything now, right? We have the knowledge, the technology. Isn't that what they said in the $6 Million Man? We got the technology, we got the skill. We do. We can put together, in this particular case, something that appears to be an all-original 1969 Hemi Charger. Now, of course, in order to build a graveyard dreams car, you gotta have a car to build into a graveyard dreams car. Now, in the case of the 71 Cuda, of course, we built most of that. We did start with a shell, but ended up using nothing but the roof on it and built the rest of it out of the AMD catalog. In this case, the car actually found me, so I had a gentleman give me a call and want a price on building a 71 Barracuda into a Cuda tribute car. So talked to him for quite a while, and it ended up in our conversation, he said one of the things he was gonna have to do to fund the restoration was to sell a 69 Charger project car that he'd been working on. So lo and behold, I made him a deal and took that in on trade towards the 71 Barracuda. And because of that, I ended up with a pretty good rolling car. Not much in the way of parts to go with it, but it was a pretty decent car. It was all one color, and it had a recent cheap paint job, but those always tell me there's a lot to be expected once we get into them. It has some nice Magnum 500s on it, but boy, it was stripped out other than that. There was really no dash assembly to speak of other than the VIN was there and the shell for that and the steering column. So we really had basically a body, which is all we need to get started. Now, because the car was pretty much stripped down and not much in the way of parts, it didn't take us long to get it disassembled and set up and ready to go to the dipper. So now things move along pretty good right up to the point of dipping. That's one of our bottlenecks. And it's nobody's fault, okay? We had the COVID thing, which basically lost 2 to 3 years of good productive work here in the whole country. I'm not the only one, but way behind in dipping. So it has to sit there in the queue for quite a while the other ones that should have been rolling through finally make it up to the top. Once the number came up for it and it was time to get it dipped, I had Doug take it off of the rack, get it down on the ground. Now, this car had all original Dodge Charger sheet metal, and while I love my AMD, we use it all the time. We couldn't put these cars together without it. It's about 1 in every 100 has original sheet metal, and I really was excited to see what that would look like when it came back. Nothing like good original sheet metal when it comes to fitting these cars. So now when it came back, it was a really nice surprise. Underneath all that cheap paint and what appeared to be a lot of filler, it was pretty solid. We did have to replace the main floor in it, the trunk floor. We had a dozen small patches. The basic sheet metal, like quarter panels, roof, door shells, and fenders and hoods, pretty darn nice. So it didn't take us long to get it through the metal shop where everything was back and squared where it's supposed to be and over to the mud room.
So the Charger went through the mudroom relatively quickly. It came to us, we did our blocking on it. With this car going black, you really have to make sure you spend the extra time to make sure there's no flaws in it, because black will show everything. So right when we get to that point to start disassembling this car and getting it ready for paint, Mark, in his brilliant wisdom, comes out and says, hey, by the way, we need subframe connectors on this. So at that point, we have to shut down again, kick it over to Josh so he can install those. This should have been taken care of when the car was being built, not when it's time to paint.
You know, I did forget about adding the subframe connectors, okay? It's not a stock piece that these cars got. I forgot about it, but this is a great example of how, we'll sit back and say, oh, he's a victim and I'm always picking on him. I happen to have a lot of things on my plate, okay? I'm a busy boy. He sits down there doing selfies all day long, and occasionally, when all of his little elves have a car ready to paint, he walks in, shoots it for an hour and a half and walks out, takes pictures of it, posts it on all of his social media and says, #1 painter did it again, #1 painter did it again. I have a lot to do, and that's why they got forgotten.
So once Josh wrapped up with the subframe connectors, at this point, the car comes back over to us. We can start disassembling it and getting it ready for all of its jam work and final paint. Because it's a black car, I decided to panel paint it, which I do on most solid colors, meaning I'm just painting the car apart. So I jam it. Once it's jammed, I can flip the parts over, paint the doors, paint the fenders, paint just the body of the car. Makes the process a lot quicker. It's just when it comes time for a body man to assemble the car, he's putting a car that's been cut and buffed and ready to go. He's got to put the whole car together very carefully. I do 4 coats of our black single stage, the 9300. That way there's a good coat that can be taken off in the cut and buff, and then that still leaves 3 coats left over. Car looks amazing. Because it's a solid color, I don't have to worry about metallics matching. I'll get all the jam work done, then I'll paint the doors by themselves, the fenders, hood, deck lid, car, all by itself. And then at that point, I'll kick it back over to Josh once it's all been buffed, and he has the tough job of putting the doors and everything on the car without making chips or dents or dings or scratches.
We've got a date-coded 69 426 Hemi with all the bolt-on pieces, not a date-coded but correct Hemi automatic transmission, and a correct date-coded 410 Dana rear axle assembly. So this car, when you open the hood, walk around it, look inside it as a done car, you should not be able to tell, other than looking at the vehicle identification number, that it was originally a 2-barrel 383 car and not a real-life 426 Hemi. That's what you have to have if you're building a Dreams car. That's what we achieved and moved it over to Brian so he could do the final assembly.